Okay, good evening. We'll call to order the regular monthly meeting of the City of Helotes Planning and Zoning Commission. It's August the 7th at 7 p.m. and I'd ask the commission secretary to call the roll, please.
Greg Michelle.
Here.
Ron Haza. Joe Edmond.
Yeah.
Richard Hawk.
Here.
Jeff Wade.
Here.
Jason Whiteman.
Here.
Mike McLaughlin.
Here.
Mario Rios.
Here.
And we have Rick Schroeder, our city administrator, and Alex Blue from city council with us tonight. Good to see everybody, and we're going to turn ahead to item 3, which is a public hearing to give all interested persons the right to appear and be heard on a request by Eric and Jennifer Sones to replat lots 8 and 9, block 11 of the Iron Horse Canyon Unit H Phase 1 subdivision into Lot 8, a single lot consisting of 2.31 acres on property at 14747 and 14781 Iron Horse Way. So we'll open the public hearing at 7:01, and I'd invite anyone who wishes to speak to this item. Someone had signed up, and this would be the right time to talk about it. If you would, when you approach the mic, just tell us your name and your address. And you have 3 minutes to address us. It's not a time for us to have a conversation or respond, but to hear your views. So I would open it up if anybody cares to speak.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm Anthony Cicchetti. I live at 300 East Bassey Road, San Antonio, 78209. My quick question is, I'm an adjacent property owner of this request. And it's a little bit of clarification, which I know you can't discuss, but I'm unclear about it, which if it's of a replat of 2 lots into 1 plat, but the use stays single-family residential, I'm in favor of that. There's some verbiage in some of the supporting document that I just got a chance to read that talks about replatting with 2 units or more, and then other documentation about 2 units or more, so that made me a little concerned that there might be some vagrancy in there that I'm not aware of. So if that's the case, though, then I'm opposed to it, so.
Okay. We'll hopefully have a chance to address that issue as we talk about it up here.
All right, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else care to speak to that item? And I note that Susan Darst from staff is here as well.
I can address that quickly if,
Let's wait and make sure we don't have anybody else. Last call on the public hearing portion. All right, we'll close it out at 7:03. Why don't we just wait till the item comes up in just a minute, Rick? Citizens to be heard. I don't believe we have anybody else signed up for items tonight. So our next item is the discussion and action on the minutes of the regular meeting from July 10th, 2018 of the Planning and Zoning Commission. You received this in your packet of material. If there are any corrections, edits, changes, please call those to our attention now, or we can have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as stated. I'll second it.
That was Mike on the second. So the motion is to approve the minutes as submitted for July 10th, 2018. All in favor, please signal aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. Thank you. Stick this in. Item 6 tonight is discussion and action on the request by Eric and Jennifer Sones to replat Lot 8 and 9 in Iron Horse Canyon Unit H Phase 1 subdivision into Lot 8, a single lot consisting of 2.31 acres on property located at 14747 and 14781 Iron Horse Way. Turn it to the city administrator. Are the applicants here tonight? Nope.
the applicants are actually out of state.
Fine, go right ahead.
And what I mean by that is they reside out of state. Essentially what this is combining 2 lots within the estates at Iron Horse Canyon into one larger lot, removing essentially the middle lot line and making it one lot. All of the covenants, all the restrictions for Iron Horse Canyon, everything remains the same. It is simply making a larger lot out of 2 smaller lots.
So to be clear, whatever covenants, restrictions, and whatnot are imposed by the HOA still hold,
Yes, sir.
okay? And so the intent here is,
I'm not quite sure what the owner's intent is. Typically, when somebody does this, it's because they want to build in the middle of a property, and you cannot build over a property line. And so that's my suspicion here, is that they want to build in the middle of a lot.
and would they still, in this setting, be able to construct a separate structure? Accessory building, garage, workshop, whatever? That's still
Yes.
permitted?
And they would be able to on those individual lots.
Individually, right?
Yeah, so
Right.
yes, they're able on this to build accessory structures as well.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that the zoning is still single-family residential use. It's not.
Yes, sir.
If they were to try to do anything else, they'd have to come before us again to request a variance for anything other than a single-family home and an accessory structure.
It would actually be impossible to zone that property anything other than R1 because that would be considered spot zoning, since it's R1 throughout that entire community.
Okay.
Other questions? I hope you all, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And just an FYI, I live in Iron Horse myself, and I'm fairly familiar with their deed restrictions, and off the top of my head, I don't quite recall, but I think it's a single-family home and a secondary structure, which needs to be considerably smaller. Don't quote me on the exact square footage, but I recall it's significantly smaller than the main structure.
Right.
So
Yeah,
it's
and
not
the city code also regulates that.
Yeah,
And it's a very small percentage of the main structure of the home.
right.
We, I hope, as you prepare, somebody prepares to do a motion, noted the comment from the city's engineer regarding the need to just make a correction to the plat. I don't know if that's already been done or not, Rick. If we need
That
to
has
have-
not been done,
We can
so I
roll it
would
into our
include that.
motion.
Yes, sir.
It's simply to relabel the document as a replat as opposed to a plat, and appropriate places on the document, on the replat itself. So with that, I'd invite a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
excuse me, there were two items that the engineer pointed out. One of them was replat, and the other one was, there were two items the engineer pointed out.
I'm seeing one, which was this replat items. If you can point me to a second item.
Read that document.
There are two locations on the signatory blocks that instead of it saying plat, should be replat.
So same thing, but just in
Yep.
two different places. That's fine. Thank you. So with that, we can take a motion, have a motion, and this I note as a recommendation item.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a recommendation.
Go ahead.
On the matter of discussion of an action on a request by Eric and Jennifer Sones to replat lots 8 and 9, Block 11, CB 54-482 of the Iron Horse Canyon, Unit H, Phase 1 subdivision into Lot 8. A single lot consisting of 2.31 acres of land on properties located at 14747 and 14781 Iron Horse Way, Helotes, Texas. Would recommend approval with the notation that the plat be corrected for the language provided by the engineer.
Okay.
Second it.
Mike, discussion, any further discussion, Jason? Michael?
I'm good, thank you.
Anyone else? So the motion is to recommend approval of the request from Eric and Jennifer Sones to replat lots 8 and 9 in Block 11 of Iron Horse Canyon, Unit H, Phase 1 subdivision into Lot 8, 2.31 acres of land, property located 14747 and 14781 Iron Horse Way. The condition that the engineer's recommendation on the language change from plat to replat be accomplished. All in favor, please signal aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This motion is approved. It will go before city council on what date, Rick?
Thursday.
This week?
Yes, sir.
So that is the 9th, August 9th. All right, item 7, and for this one, Rick, would you just go to the image for us, help with the discussion? Item 7 is discussion and action on a request by Belinda G. Gauna for for approval of a creative wall sign pursuant to the Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 98, Section 72, subparagraphs G6, B2, and G7, which are commercial signs projecting, wall hanging in or on windows, and creative sign review for Old Helotes Inn at 14405 Old Bandera Road. And I turn it over to the city administrator. Anyone representing the applicant here tonight? Great. If we have any questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Staff did review this item, as was included within the backup documentation. The only issue that staff sees with this item is the actual size. The sign is approximately 50 square feet, and what is allowed by code is 32 square feet. We encourage the applicant to submit the creative sign variance because this sign is very similar to the signage that is on the B-Daddy's building, but the one fronting Old Bandera Road. And if you recall, in the past, the commission granted, I believe, a variance for a larger sign because it fit within the middle of that sort of typical Old Town roof line, is what I would call it. And so we believe that this is very similar to that situation. We don't believe, from an aesthetic standpoint, we just believe that it fits the building. And so we are recommending approval of the variance. This would need to go because it's a creative sign to council, and it is on council's agenda on the 9th as well.
Have to go to council either way.
That's true.
We'll come back to that. All right, so this had been most recently the Solar Sports Building, is that right?
That is correct.
Do you recall the signage on that building, if it was occupying the same space? Because I don't.
If I recall, it was occupying the same space. I don't know what the size of it was, but it was occupying the same area.
Let me open it up to the group here for questions, and we do have the applicant here if anybody has any questions for her.
Mr. Chairman,
Ron?
is this being uplit? Since I see a light on the porch.
If I recall, they put on lighting that it would not be illuminated.
I think that's a very,
Okay. Other questions?
From the graphic here, is that the sign itself like a cutout? I'm having trouble kind of reading how exactly it's built.
I would
Be a good
defer.
time, maybe, ma'am, if you wouldn't mind coming up. Probably the best person to answer some of that. If you just, for the record, put your name and business address.
Okay. Valinda G. Gauna, 14405 Old Bandera Road, Old Helotes Inn.
So the question was,
How is the sign constructed? From this rendering, it sort of looks like it's just painted on the building. Is it-
No, it's not. He just graphically put it up there so that we could see how it would look. And it is, I want to let y'all know, it looks just like the solar sign, the size wide, and it's exactly in the same place. Matter of fact, it'll be mounted on the same ones that it was before. And that light was already there from solars. That wasn't us. But it is, I believe it's going to be painted to look like it's wood,
Okay.
what's it actually constructed of?
some kind of metal.
A metal, all right.
Some type of a metal that they put, he does like the wraps, I think, something like that, to make it look like it's older and Western, to go with the town,
Right.
to keep the same. And I believe he said also, if you take off the corners, I think because it's measured corner to corner, and there's no corners on there. So it's a little bit bigger.
Any other questions for the
You mean
applicant?
it's
So the dimensions are a little bit larger than what the sign actually is what you're saying?
No, in actuality, it's the corners don't show on the sign.
I see, okay.
So it's really smaller if you take off those four corners. He said it's basically maybe 6 square feet, bigger than the 32. That's why we asked for the variance.
Rick, do we usually measure the entire space, or do we do the precise, the footprint versus the actual signage?
We would look at the actual signage, but in the case regardless, it's over the variance requirement, so we don't spend a lot of time at that point trying to measure. If it's very close, we'll work with the sign contractor to get them to give us.
I can show you a picture of Solars, and it's pretty close, the same sign. If you want to see it, if anybody'd like to see it.
You can pass it around, sure. As a creative sign, I don't believe the ordinance says that they are required to have the address on it. Is that
Not on a wall sign.
not on a wall sign? Square. Do you know if the address is on the building?
It is, it's by the door,
Okay.
and it's kind of hard to see.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. Is that the
Mario.
only sign that the structure has?
Right now it is, I still needed to get with them to see what other signs I could put on both sides. I thought I could, Solars had one on each side, and then the big sign.
Thank you.
And then I'd also want a sign for the parking lot, but that's later.
I would just encourage you to make sure you review the code regarding
Right.
signage, because it's very specific.
See, I designed it, but he did it, and then he told me it's bigger than it's supposed to be, you probably need to do a variance. He did warn me it was, but it was because it's rounded and not squared.
Okay.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions, motion would be in order.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion.
Please.
Motion to approve a request by Belinda G. Gano for approval of creative wall sign pursuant to Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 98 zoning, Section 9872, Old Town Helotes, Special District, commercial signs projecting wall, hanging, or in and on windows, and creative sign review for Old Helotes Inn located at 14405 Old Bandera Road, Helotes, Texas 78023. Motion to,
And just to clarify, Mario, to recommend approval?
yes,
Okay.
yes, sir.
Is there a second?
I'll say.
Jeff, further discussion, Mario or Jeff?
We're good.
Anything further?
I guess I would like to maybe see that light be taken down or not used at all. Just, we need to make a statement that.
Should we have an amendment to the
So,
motion?
well, I mean, if you wish to, if he agrees, you could amend the motion to have that in the motion. We could talk about that motion.
I agree with that, to have the light removed.
So you want
We
to,
can make that in the motion.
do you want to amend your motion accordingly?
with-
Can I interject something?
Yep.
Chair? Would the commission entertain changing the lighting so that it is full cutoff rather than not full cutoff or indirect lighting? Because the code does allow for
That's
full
true.
cutoff lighting of wall signs,
Now, by full cutoff, it's typically meant downward.
downward
Right.
lit.
Someone over, yeah,
Yes.
not what was
Yes.
pictured there. Yeah.
Hold on a second. So wait, we got a motion pending. So do you want to amend your motion that you made, Mario?
I can amend, but, I mean, I know you're looking for the right verbiage, but my verbiage would be with the motion I read with the stipulation that the light be removed from the structure.
Okay, so you're saying no, what you're suggesting for the motion that there be no light.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so hang on a second. If you're going to make that motion, are you going to,
Isn't that what, I want to make sure that my colleague here, Jeff, that's what you said, correct? Is that what I was understanding?
That's originally what I said.
Okay.
Then come back to Rick, I would maybe amend it saying.
Okay, that's where I got,
Any,
yes.
any lighting would have to be downward full cutoff and the light on the patio be removed.
so would that be acceptable to you, Mario, as an amendment to have the lighting be full cutoff and downward facing?
That will work.
And Jeff, that's all right with you?
Yes.
All right, so that's the motion now. So now any discussion about that motion? Mario, anything to add? Or Jeff, anything to add?
I just think the business owner for being out here today and also for keeping the Old Town Helotes character. I like the the schematics of that sign, so I just want to
Okay,
put that out in public.
anything, anybody with anything else?
Just to clarify, there is an amendment, which is,
Is to have the lighting, stipulating the lighting be full cutoff downward facing.
I just want to be clear, the application said it will not be illuminated.
Correct. We're saying you may have.
Okay.
It doesn't require that they
Sure,
have lighting.
okay.
It's not a requirement.
We're just
Yeah, no.
constraining it.
If they want to add lighting, it'd be full
Correct.
color.
Anybody else? All right, so the motion is to recommend approval of the request by Valinda Gigana for approval of the creative wall sign pursuant to the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 98, Section 72, subparagraph G6B2, that's commercial signs projecting wall, hanging, or in or on windows, and G7, creative sign review for Old Helotes Inn, 14405 Old Bandera Road, with the stipulation that any lighting be full cutoff and downward facing. All in favor of the motion, signal aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion is approved, so Thursday of this week, council will have an opportunity to discuss and make the final determination. Well, thank you. Is the business open? Great, and I hate to ask this, what type of business is it? Come actually put it on the record for our viewers at home.
It's an event center, so it's mostly open in the evenings. The only time we're open on the bar side is like special events, or when there's people in Helotes, like your market days, your jazz festivals, big concert nights will be open just on that little section. But the whole premise of having the business is, it is an event center, and I've had several events there already, and I'm already booked for next year,
Great,
so,
perfect. Well, best of luck.
yeah, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, item 8 tonight, our final item is discussion and action on an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Helotes amending Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 98 zoning by providing for City Council review and approval of conceptual design plans for commercial and single-family residential subdivision developments. The rest of the verbiage is there, I won't repeat it. As a review, this is a part of an item that we've seen over the past, this is the third meeting, I believe, going back to May or June, I guess, where council had asked this body for a recommendation on amending the Code of Ordinances to give council, as opposed to this body, final approval authority for signage, lighting, and design, the conceptual design plans for residential and commercial. As you guys know, we postponed it for 2 months in a row at City Council in, I believe it was mid-July. Council, after consulting with the attorney, determined that they did not need this body's recommendation to act on 2 of those areas, one signs and the other lighting. And so at that meeting, they authorized, voted to move that authority, final authority, to City Council. However, the third area, which is the conceptual design plan as part of the zoning code, actually does need a recommendation of some type from planning and zoning before council can act. So that is why that is the item that is before us tonight. Rick, does that fairly capture it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So council awaits our recommendation, and then they'll do what they do, and this will be done. So I open it up for discussion on the conceptual design piece. I recognize there may be some lingering concerns or issues about the other 2, but they're not part of our agenda and really not appropriate for discussion since they're already resolved. On conceptual design planning, though, you have the document in your packet. It was in last month's as well. If you have any questions or concerns about this would be the time to bring them to our attention.
Mr. Chair.
Yep, Mike.
Yeah, several of them I included some notes. I was unfortunately detained or occupied by some medical things going on. Overall, I'm not sure and I know you said the other two are gone, but it applies to all three of the ordinances. I'm not sure what problem the council is wanting to fix. To come up and say, just because other cities do this, I don't know why we need to do it. That's what makes Helotes unique. And in some ways, I can interpret as, okay, you don't like our decisions, or you don't have confidence in us, we'll just take that authority, privilege, whatever you want to call it, away. So my question is, what problems have there been in the past to bring this about? It doesn't make any sense. So I can make recommendations all day long. I don't think we provide the value that we could provide by having the authority. Responsibility does lie with the city council. They can delegate the authority. That's the typical management style. We have things in place. I've got the original master plan from 24 years ago. So there's been, and it's grown and evolved since then. There's things in place to guide us with that authority. I don't think we've been used, generally speaking, as a planning organization effectively over the years anyway. We've got a park. We didn't plan the park. There's been annexations. There's been ordinances go along with the annexations. We weren't part of that. And as a matter of fact, the city council made that recommendation. They're paying off lawsuits as a result. So maybe planning could have helped with that. I'm not sure why we're recommending all day long. Maybe some of the more serious things like a new master plan or, an overall guiding an overall thing like that. Sure, the city council should do that. There are things I agree they should do. There's things you can't delegate. But I think in several cases, they're delegating to us that authority. I don't see a problem with. We haven't created any problems in the past that I'm aware of. We haven't resulted in any lawsuits. I think the city would protect us just like they do the council members should that occur, especially if we're doing it in good faith. I don't know what problem this is fixing or what problem, it sounds like a solution looking for a problem. I'm not clear where it came from or why it's there or where it's going. I saw in the packet, some stuff highlighted in yellow. It'd save us from making difficult decisions. Why can't we make a difficult decision? We're grown something men, possibly ladies, and, if we had a female member. I don't see why. I'm not clear on where this is coming from or where it's
Okay.
going.
All right.
Bottom line. Oh, and one other thing, I'm sorry. I talked to the mayor about it, and he said, well, whatever action we make can't be reversed. Well, in the packet, there's a lined out paragraph where there is an appeals process for someone that doesn't agree with our decision to the city council, so it can be reversed. So we're not immune, that we answer to the city council, I got it. But why we can't be making some of these decisions, I'm not clear.
Okay, other concerns, questions?
I'd like to make a comment. I'd like to applaud Commissioner McLaughlin. I totally support his stance as well. I don't understand about items 1 and 2 that you mentioned, Greg. I know, that it is what it is, the signs and the lighting, but if we have only the one final slice, which is the conceptual zone code, it would be good if we had something that we could hang our hat on for what we do. I mean, we do give up our time to be here. I mean, I know we all do. I can tell you right now, I just worked a long day and I got another one facing me tomorrow, but I'm here tonight because I care about our town and I care about our community and I want to help. And I think if we're just here to just be giving our opinions and then that's really all we're doing, we're not doing any good government work if we can't take action. And I think everything we do it the best we can. We know that the city council is the city council and they're great at what they do, but I also believe that we're great at what we do. And I do think that we should have some play in the big scheme of things. So I'm just talking in generalities here, but my thought is that I could not support this tonight. That's my feel. Thank you.
And I do remind everyone, if you haven't, just to make sure that you've seen the introductory letter that the mayor wrote that accompanied this a couple months ago that addresses some of these issues, whether you agree with it or not. Make sure you saw that. I don't want to put you on the spot, Alex, but I will. As our liaison, you might, if you would, maybe just take a couple minutes and represent council's view on this for the group.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to pretend to speak for all members of the council, that they're perfectly capable of that on their own. I also can tell you that, to my knowledge, it was not members of council that brought this forth. It originated, from my understanding, with the mayor. And I'm not saying I'm blaming the mayor for anything or less, because council was the one who voted on it and not the mayor. What I can tell you, for those, and most of you who've lived in this city for long enough to recall, I know half of the members of this commission have been involved in this process for at least 10 years, when you can recall that planning and zoning more than 10 years ago didn't have anything to do with signs and architectural stuff to begin with, right? It was all through the Architectural Review Committee. And so what didn't rest here to begin with, and that's not an excuse for why it's being changed, but it is not an inherent right of any particular body or organization to have that responsibility. And Councilmember McLaughlin, you made it correct that the responsibility lies, the authority can be delegated, but the responsibility lies. And this, I think, is what prompted most of the members, I can't say all because I don't want to speak for them, to say that they felt the responsibility was one that needed to come back to council. I will not say that there was any particular activity that occurred that caused council or individual members of the council to believe that there was any lack of trust in this organization, or lack of belief that the opinions matter. I can tell you from years of listening to the discussion, the opinions put forth in this commission do carry weight with members of the council. I can tell you that the members of the council do on occasion listen to the actual tape before the council meetings to try to get that information. I don't, because I'm here in generally most of the time. I missed one recently. And so that's the case. The comment that was made with regard to things are non-reversible are not so much when this body declines something. Yes, when this body declines something, the council can indeed hear an appeal from the recipient, as much as it is the reverse. When this commission grants something that members of the council would otherwise have said no to, then that is irreversible and unappealable, because then the council has no authority to do so. I can think of a couple different occurrences where that would have been the case, but neither of them actually prompted this particular action. The perfect example I could think of is the allowance of this commission by a large majority to allow Casa Helotes to have a mobile home on their property. In knowing the members of the council, that would have easily failed. However, it never came to council because this body gave that authority to the recipient. So there was no appeal, there was no denial, there was no action the council could take. That's but one example of something that's granted that's unreversible. Not anything denied is clearly reviewable. There's no question about that. But it's the other way around, I think, that caused some concern with a couple. It was reluctantly that I went ahead with the vote on that night. It wasn't a slam dunk with all members of the commission, because we really did want this commission's recommendation one way or the other before taking the vote. But it was clear that night that was not going to be delayed. There was a lot of discussion. Our city administrator can attest to that. There was a lot of discussion that night about whether we should or shouldn't wait for the response and that. And in the end, it seemed obvious that the decision was going to be made one way or the other, and delaying it by one more month wasn't going to alter the end result decision made by the council, and so the vote was gone ahead and taken. But I don't know if that weighs anything on your decision. I can assure you that it is not as a lack of trust. I also can assure you, were I in your seat, I would want the opportunity to express opinion, even if it wasn't a final decision, simply because that does influence the actions of the city. It does. I hear the comments all the time when things come through to council. They listen to and they weigh the opinions expressed here very carefully. They make their own independent decisions. I've probably voted against more majority decisions in the council than anyone else in the last 7 years, but everyone has that right. And that's something that I would hope that doesn't get personally offensive to the point where any of you choose not to continue to serve in this capacity, because it is a very valuable thing that you bring. There are other actions that the Planning and Zoning Commission are. If I'm not mistaken, every 5 years, you're supposed to redo the master plan. I don't think that's been addressed in many years. And that would probably be appropriate, simply because we've annexed so many other things, et cetera. You do have a lot of say in what goes on into a lot of the different things. The plans that you had made with the little buttons on the thing weighed considerably on how it ended up with city council, even though those were actually recommendation items, but they almost, I think it was pretty much entirely, council voted exactly the way planning and zoning did, based on all of your opinions and the way that came out. So that doesn't, it's not a lack of confidence, it's not a lack of that, it's just there are many different feelings that I think caused the vote to occur. And one is the belief that the final decision rests with an elected official and not an appointed one, that it hasn't always been this way to begin with, so it doesn't always have to be that way. The words of the city attorney weighed a great deal when they said that most planning and zoning commissions don't have that much authority. Well, I would venture to say that most planning and zoning commissions in this area don't have that authority because they have very weak sign ordinances. I take pride in the fact that we have a strong sign ordinance that keeps our city beautiful the way we all moved here for. And I'll continue to fight for that every time we go around in that regard, regardless. So I've gotten more past that into opinion, but hopefully it's addressed a little bit of it, and make a recommendation whichever way it is. That's what this body is supposed to do, is to talk about it, discuss it, air those opinions, make a recommendation, do a vote, and move forward.
Thank you. I would add a couple things. I do agree on a certain level with what Mike said about what other cities do. In many ways, I think that's misleading as a standard. I don't think whether we do it the same or different is really all that important. It's is the city, or has the city been well served by this arrangement? I agree with you. I think that it has. I mean, council believes that because they're the elected officials, and that's a reasonable argument to make, but that's what they believe. But I do think it should be clear to everybody here, and I hope Alex's words, everybody takes them seriously, that the city has been well served by us. And I think it's really important to know that going forward, if we are a recommending body, that doesn't make our work any less significant or any less important. It makes it less final, but it doesn't make it less important. And I think that's important. And I will say, speaking personally, that if I were to feel that going forward our work really wasn't going to make a difference, I personally wouldn't see the need to continue on this commission, because then it really would not be a good use of my time or very beneficial to the city. So I'm sensitive to that, and I don't want anyone to walk out of here thinking, we don't count or we don't matter anymore. I think our recommendation still does. On the item before us, which is the conceptual design plan, as those of you who were here last month know, this is the one I personally felt that really does belong with council. I'm going to be interested to see how lighting and signage works at the council level, and see how that process plays out, because of the volume that they'll be dealing with and the complexity of some of those issues on top of everything else they're doing. But conceptual design planning, from my perspective, which has to do with some fairly major, or can deal with fairly major developments, seems to me to be a rather appropriate area for which council should have the final authority. If you remember, just recently, within the past 3-4 months, the development, it's not in Old Town, it's behind Old Town, Hacienda del something or another, very large development. And council had no input on that, because it wasn't, am I correct, that was not in Old Town. And so it would seem to me that an elected official would want to have the ability to have input on that. And we do count, I should say, on our liaison to make sure that council is informed of what we're doing. I write a report each month. It's available to council, that goes to the mayor. It is something that they should have access to know what this body is doing. Nonetheless, from my perspective, that type of large-scale commercial or mixed-use development absolutely belongs with having some responsibility or final responsibility with the council. But that's just on this particular issue. I hope that as this wraps up, as you go forward, know that I, for one, and I think Alex as well, and ultimately the council, does value this group's recommendations. If you don't feel that way, please talk to me about it. Please approach Alex about it, and let's try to resolve it, whatever that issue is. And just remember that ultimately, final authority does not mean that we are out of the loop or not making a contribution. And that's what I would hope people would remember. Any other comments? Yeah.
Another
go ahead.
comment. So, I was not here last month, but I was here the month before for that discussion. Since that past meeting, I've had a lot of time to think about it, and I also had the opportunity to reach out to another attorney who is very well versed in municipal law and is another attorney that does the same thing that our attorney does, and he kind of made the same assessment that it is pretty uncommon. That he can't think of a single municipality he's ever worked with that P&Z had this authority. And he did it sent me some written documents that referred to the point Alex made about that when we say no, city council can come back and say yes, they can overrule us, but when we say yes, they can't, and it moves forward. And I think delving deeper into that point, it was a little bit about P&Z has sort of a limited authority in our jurisdiction, in the sense that we're concerned with planning and zoning and issues that surround that, and issues that largely are aesthetic and planning concerns when we approve things. But there may be reasons beyond that where it may be appropriate to disapprove a development that really are not part of that equation and part of that authority that really falls to city council to stop. But that we really don't have the authority to stop because it's not really part of our purview. And so, that would be the only reason that I think I would be kind of on board with this. Just with a caveat, though, that I would say that, if this moves forward and we do sort of acquiesce this authority, that I think it becomes more urgent upon this committee to be, even more explicit in our recommendations, because I think that they, if we are limited to making a recommendation, that we have to be very thorough in explaining our rationale, not just saying, we approve or don't approve it, but we have to, explicitly say to city council, we are approving or not approving this because of these particular reasons. We don't feel like this, we feel like either this is going to benefit our community or not benefit our community in regards to the planning and zoning codes that we have before us, and explain why. And then I think that kind of forces them to either, and that's not antagonistic unnecessarily, but it does kind of force them to, be open about, why they are or not supporting our decision or our recommendation, excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, my big concern is, and this is the chicken place with the red and white. We sent that back, is it 3 times before we approved it? That what's going to happen now, if we disapprove it, is it just going to go to council and they're going to approve it? That really concerns me, that, because it took a lot of work to refine that we'll lose that ability to control some of this stuff that really looked outrageous.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with that. That's a good point. Because we are, I don't know what the right term would be, but we do spend a lot of time working with these applicants over 2 or 3 months, only because that's when our meetings are. just to give them guidance, you know, maybe they've gotten guidance from the staff, hadn't followed it, or had, whatever the reason, they get where they are. With the red and white, we take a lot of time to make that better or right, so that once it gets to the city council, it's an easy kill for them. I don't see them taking the time, if they're, in my view, and I think I put it in my email, in my view, they should be visionaries or looking out for the grander goal, not worrying about whether something's red and white. That tactical level, you know, we like to call it. What's that visionary? What's the big picture? What are the big problems we're solving at the city council level? Do they really, and I guess they're gonna take it on, because, you know, I don't know what that's gonna end up being, because now they're taking on red and white, you know?
Yeah, and I wouldn't sell them short, you know, they're not just sitting up there.
No, I'm not trying to say that,
No.
but I don't see, if they want to do it and they have, if they can, fine, but I don't envision a city council going to that level. That would be something historically we've done to that level, and
So
that.
hypothetically, the way I would see something like that would develop is that same conversation, that same process we had would continue. So if we had an applicant come in and for whatever reason we didn't like the color scheme or something was off, we wouldn't make a recommendation then, right? We'd send them away and come back next month and then we'll do it again. Well, then our final, we make a recommendation, it goes to
So
council.
that part would stay the same.
Everything
for
stays
sure.
the same. Now, the applicant could walk into city council and say, I'd rather do what I actually proposed, right? And then it becomes incumbent upon us through our minutes, through the report I write, through our liaison, to ensure that everybody on council, including the mayor, understands why it is that we propose that the red and white be less red and white, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But ultimately, right, I mean, you could say it's a matter, you're taking a leap of faith here that they're going to uphold us, but, you know, I guess that's where people can differ on whether they should have that final authority or not. I mean, is anybody else not, who wanted to talk, say anything? All right, loop back around, go ahead.
Sure, but just to play the devil's advocate to your question, I mean, in theory, they could have just gone straight to city council and asked to override us, because we said no. That, I think.
That was a no that you could make a yes, right?
They could just make an end run around us anyway.
True.
It doesn't really stop that from happening. And I think, just spitballing, I mean, is there a way that we could try to make that process slightly more interactive when those kind of situations happen? I mean, is there, either by the authority we still would have to say, look, we recommend, we're not gonna recommend approval, but what we recommend you do is take our advice and come back
You would,
next month.
yeah, if I could, Chair, the commission would simply do a postponement of that item until a date certain, typically the following month. I would assume there would be some dialogue before that action was taken, whether the applicant wishes to proceed to council, and if they do, you make your recommendation. If they don't, then it gets postponed to the following month. Most commercial developers don't want to go to city council with a no from a planning and zoning commission. So the more important developments, if you will continue to work with this body because, again, they don't want to know from this commission before they have to go to council. So, but you always have the option of postponing, and I'm not talking about this item. I think this body needs to make a decision on this item today. But in the future, on some sort of commercial conceptual design plans, you certainly can work with the applicant to move those, to allow you all more opportunity to review it and work with the developer.
Mr. Chairman, could we get some good verbiage added to this to help that along? You know, so we don't end up with people, well, just jumping through, because, you know, remember that was the guy who came in and said, we need to approve this today or they're not gonna come to town? Was his first line. You know, if there's any way we can add anything into the document to help us to control, you know, some of the businesses.
I think it's still there. I mean, you know,
Yeah,
you're
you're
just
still
changing
governed by-
approval to recommend. They still, you can't skip this part of the process.
No, you can't skip this part of the process because it's in the zoning code. If it wasn't in the zoning code, council could do essentially whatever it wanted with or without y'all's opinion. But because it resides in the zoning code, you do have to take an action, and a recommendation is an action.
Right,
Well, so if we deny, that's an action.
right.
Yes, sir.
So we would have to go with a, please come back.
No, you would make a motion to postpone the item, until, just like you did for this item. And that would give us a month to work with that developer at a staff level to get it the way y'all wanted to see it. As much as that developer wants it. I mean, ultimately, that's the developer's project, and if they want to present something to council that y'all disagree with, then you would simply make a recommendation to deny the application in its entirety. But before you got to that point, you would have the opportunity to postpone, to be able to mold that project how this body would like to see it before it went to council. Now, I will say that most of the projects that have come to y'all, other than the red and white, and by the way, the staff recommendation was to deny that project in its entirety, most of the other projects that have come to y'all have been pretty close to the design standards that we have in Chapter 98. I mean, there has been some exceptions, but most of them comply 95% of the way. And so I don't see a constant need to have to postpone, but that's certainly the commission's.
As I think about when we as a body have had applicants return for a subsequent meeting, my recollection is generally what happens is they can tell that we're not going to approve what they've proposed. Whether it's a color scheme or there's no wainscoting or whatever it is, and their understanding of this body's concern, and they will go and rework it and return the next month, which something closer to what we're looking for. You know, that dialogue happens and there's some revision, and then we make the approval. So, I mean, I'm not anticipating, and I don't think there'll be any change to that entire process. It does put more of a burden, yes, on council. It's on their plate. It puts more of a burden on applicants who now have to, come out for two separate meetings. Sometimes that can be inconvenient, right? But, it is what it is. And this is the way the council wishes to be able to, have the final authority. I do encourage you, by the way, I think it would be worthwhile if you have time and you're interested. Council on Thursday night will be taking up this item if you wish to share your views. I also think, in Alex, we have someone who is deeply familiar with the work that this group does. As I think most of you know, he was on this commission for 10 or 12 years before he ascended to council. And so he's a real advocate for what we do and how the basis of our recommendations, and represents us well. The only thing I would add is, on the rare occasion you can't be here, and a couple of meetings ago, whenever that was, you had car trouble or something, whenever possible, when it's predictable anyway, is if you can't make it, get someone else from council, encourage someone else from council to sit in, just so that there's that representation. That's always useful. At this point, I would like to see if we can get a motion, a recommendation on this item. And whatever we recommend, but we do need to put something out there for council to act on this week. So I open it up for a motion. And you don't have to read the whole thing, just read the relevant part. Not everybody all at once now.
I'm gonna wait it out. I always do this.
What I do in class, I wait. Silence gets too uncomfortable with somebody eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jeopardy music.
There you go.
You're at home. The sound is still working on you.
So, anybody gonna jump?
I do have a, if I may.
Go ahead.
So earlier I said, I'm not sure what problem this is fixing. And everybody, everybody can explain their way through it, and, yeah, make it either, whatever way sounds okay. But what is the bigger problem? Is it just this thing, or should there be a larger look at overall planning and zoning relative to counselor, or is this one thing all we're, because there've already been two other ordinances. What other stuff was gonna pop up? What is the big problem that we're trying to address?
Well,
Still don't know that.
Well, as Alex had indicated, this began with the mayor
I understand.
and
I
the
got
3A,
all
right?
that. I
So as
got
far
all
as we
that.
know, but remember, there's certain areas where we're statutorily sort of have the responsibility, plating, schedule of uses, master planning, that type of thing.
Yeah, I get it. There's things that we have to recommend. That's fine.
Right, well, let me,
I just don't know how big this problem is that we, may come again, or how many times we're gonna fix whatever it is we're fixing.
well, to circle back to red and white, one of the arguments I recall at the series of meetings we had was that I think there was a neighboring business who petitioned us to say, I don't want this here because it's going to affect my business. And we were advised by the city attorney that that is not a basis for us to make the decision. We
Right.
simply cannot consider that. And in fact, that's, our bylaws say we cannot consider economic factors. That's been in our training with the city attorney. But I think that the council, in theory, could say, no. We just simply do not need another project of this ilk in our town at this location. And but if we approve it strictly on P and Z's authority, it's gotten by them. They have no opportunity to say, no, we don't want this here. And that, I think that was a concern, I think, by some city council, and I think by some citizens. I've heard that personally around town when it started to be constructed. Hey, why is that there? Hey, Mr. Commissioner, why didn't you stop it? Well, I don't, it's not my authority to say you can't do this here as long as it complies with everything else, and we're satisfied that it meets the development codes. We are, somewhat obligated to approve it. I mean, not, the use of it is irrelevant.
Right, but we always have the authority to deny something. And either way, even if it is approved, if we see it, that's not for the best intents for the city. And I think that's where the trust would come in, that the city council knows we would do that. There is a master plan, there is, the design standards for Old Town. That's, like Alex said, we've got some pretty good stuff compared to other cities. When you look around, it shows.
Well, if there's an undercurrent here of opposition to this idea, I'd like to invite anyone who thinks this is bad to please make a motion. make a motion that this body recommend disapproval. See if it gets majority vote. And let council know that this body has considered it and has talked through it and thinks it is a mistake.
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead.
I make the motion that we disapprove
Recommend disapproval.
of the conceptual design plan by city council.
So just to get the language right here, recommending disapproval of amending the municipal code, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Chapter 98 zoning by providing city council review and approval of the conceptual design plans for commercial and single-family residential subdivision development. Is that what you're going towards, Richard?
Yes, sir.
So is there a second on that? Michael, all right. I don't know that we need more discussion, but we can. Richard, do you have anything to add? Michael?
Maybe just a real quick recap. I think there's been some good points made by everyone here tonight. There's certainly nothing that's off base. I think they're all healthy discussions, but like I said, I'm just not quite sure what it is we're trying to solve. When you talk about it on the individual level, yeah, everything makes sense, but what's the big picture? How does that affect us?
Anyone else?
I'd like to make a comment. My comment is, along with what we just heard from Commissioner McLaughlin, and I know I missed the last meeting, but it would, for something like this is just my opinion. For something like this, wouldn't it be beneficial for this commission to have some type of formal presentation of we're at a Y in the road and these are our options, the pros and cons for both sides? I think this is a turning point for this commission, in my mind. But I think I'm like the newbie here, so I've been here for a little while now, but I've been here enough to have an opinion, and it just seems to me we should have some type of formal presentation. I don't know if it's from staff or if it's someone from council, even though I thought Mr. Alex and I did a wonderful job in his impromptu remarks. But, and again, I'm just talking here, but I'm just saying, it would be nice to understand that the A to Z of why this has come to about. That's my thought. I just wanted to say that publicly.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Hang on, anybody else? Quick.
Yeah, one more. Now I'm losing it again, sorry. Never mind. It escaped me, I'm sorry.
However this vote turns out, it turns out, you know, but I think, keep in mind, the one thing that does trouble me a little bit about just the tenor of it, it almost makes it sound like this is adversarial. We're all supposed to be sort of pulling in the same direction, and if we're not, there's bigger problems afoot. And so I hope people keep in mind that there are people of goodwill on both sides here, if you will. And, you know, we're all working hopefully for the betterment of Helotes. And so I think keep that in mind, despite your feelings or concerns about what this item is and what council may or may not do. All right, let's vote. If you please just raise your hand and make it easier for Ron. The motion is to recommend disapproval of amending the Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 98 zoning by providing for city council review and approval of conceptual design plans for commercial and single-family residential subdivision developments, the rest of the verbiage there. If you're in favor of that motion to recommend disapproval, please raise your hand or say, well, just raise your hand, do it that way. 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 5, 6. Opposed to the motion? 1. Okay, so we have a recommendation. Recommendation passes, which is to recommend disapproval, which will go to city council on Thursday night of this week, I gather? Okay. Okay, I thank everybody for their time on this. I know this has been a hard issue to work on, but thank you for your consideration of it. At this time, Ron, would you like to make a motion?
Chairman, may I make a motion to adjourn?
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, signal aye.
Aye.
Stand adjourned, it's 8:04.